Item number: YOS-2878. Object class: safe. Containment procedures: YOS-2878 is to be kept within a 7 meter by 7 meter by 7 meter enclosure made out of porcelain. Stains caused by YOS-2878 are to be removed on a 3-day period in order to prevent contamination.
YOS-2878 is allowed to roam the facility within 2 to 6 hours daily, and must be looked over when necessary.
Paragraph was stricken from the document. See Incident 2878-01. Physical contact with YOS-2878 must not be attempted, unless for testing purposes. Since YOS-2878 doesn't require sustenance from nutritional foods, foods made out of its mass are permitted. If YOS-2878 is experiencing changes in health or behavior, it must be reported by doctor and must be acquired in additional dose of its mass. Additional contact between Site-22 staff, and other anomalies, is to be limited. After multiple conversations with YOS-2878 and YOS-2884, its room must be connected with YOS-2884's new room connected with a wooden door. Description: YOS-2878 appears as a thick, gelatinous, partially translucent mass of what appears to be 425 kilograms of slime. Appearing in a greenish color, it is entirely shapeless in its original form, but it commonly takes the form of what looks like a human female, although with some changes in its shape. It is sticky upon physical contact, and parts of its common shape constantly starts to drop from its mass. It can increase or decrease in height by somehow increasing the mass of itself, and can grow to the size of an African bush elephant, Loxodonta africana, and shrink to the size of an African pygmy mouse, Mus minatoides, but it mostly prefers staying to the size of an average human. Despite only taking the form of a female, it can change into other animals or objects if it wants to, but it will go back to its common shape once it completes its goal. YOS-2878 appears to not need sustenance by consuming real nutrients of numerous food supplies, and it lacks any internal organs within it, so it uses its own body to consume and increase its own mass at will. YOS-2878 can rarely at times wear any clothing that perfectly fits its body, although it shows signs of extreme discomfort when wearing a certain type of clothing. Even though it wears clothing, it mostly prefers not to wear them in order to not cause discomfort. YOS-2878 occasionally sheds its own mass at a time between 3 to 4 hours, and rarely sheds out large chunks of itself. This doesn't cause great damage or distress to it, as it can simply regrow its mass with little issue. The shredded material from YOS-2878 will remain intact for a 21-hour period, as a result, will emit large amounts of bacteria and contaminants, and will eventually experience decomposition for no less than 2 hours. This doesn't affect YOS-2878 in any way when it's nearby. This shredded material is somewhat edible to consumption, and can be digested without incident. Subjects who consumed the material reported that it has a sweet taste of strawberry jello, vanilla yogurt, milk chocolate M&Ms, and a small hint of chocolate chip cookies. The reasons for these flavored edible products within the material is unknown, as YOS-2878 is incapable of ingesting anything that is not its own mass. The shredded material is to be removed and will either be eaten or incinerated in order to prevent contamination. YOS-2878 appears to be passive to any living organism it sees, and will often try to communicate with them, with slightly muffled, slightly squishy yet still hearable English, although it will change its vocalization when with an animal, and sometimes take their own forms. Addendum 2878-1. YOS-2878 was discovered within an abandoned home, that has been partially covered with its own material, but emits a quite pleasant scent of smell. MTF Unit 34 went in, and it went with them willingly, and was transported to the site. Incident 2878-01. YOS-2878 was allowed to roam Site-22 at will, but the staff were unaware of it capable of shedding itself. As a result, the shredded material decomposed, and the site was in immediate lockdown. The hallways were polluted with a pleasant smell from spray devices, and the shredded mass was removed upon coming into contact with the water. YOS-2878 was eventually found and must be in its enclosure at all times. Addendum 2878-2. Interview logs. 2 interviews were conducted prior to incident. Interviewer: Dr. Kelvine. Interviewee: YOS-2878.
Hello 2878, can you still speak?
YOS-2878 nods, and attempts to speak.
Yes. I can, still, speak.
Great, I just want to ask you about the shedding on yourself. Is there a reason for that? Also feel free to take your time to answer.
I didn't notice any of that, but I didn't think any of that.
YOS-2878 is immediately capable of speaking without tissue.
Although I still can save myself.
What made you start doing this in the first place?
I don't know, I think I got too much of myself to handle, so I decided to remove some of that, I think.
Well, it causes a massive amount of bacteria to inject and it will decompose. That's why we need to get rid of those pieces from you.
Well, you should have brought it back to me if you are that desperate.
Well, unfortunately, that won't happen, because it might do something to you horribly, and we won't let that happen.
If you say so.
Anyways, I'll see you later 2878. Goodbye.
Interview log 2. Subjects: YOS-2878 and YOS-2884.
Greetings, little strange green lady.
Hi.
My name is Sailor Moon, and it's my duty to save the world from threats.
That's nice.
I've known all of my teammates, and we can defeat evil, until they fall down defeated.
What kind of evil?
I'm afraid I can't tell, because I like to keep these guys a secret at times.
Guess that's fair. You seem pretty cool for a lady. You wanna be friends?
Sure, at least I got another good citizen to talk to. I'll try my best to see you as much as I can.
Thank you.
Closing statement. YOS-2878 and YOS-2884 was assumed to have become friends during the interaction, and YOS-2884 promised to see her for a random period of time. As a result, the interaction of both subjects is to be accepted. Addendum 2878-3. YOS-2878 was set up for multiple test logs for each YOS subject with inside 22. See Testing Logs 2878 for details. Testing Logs 2878. Below are the testing logs with YOS-2878. Test 1. Subject: YOS-029. Results: both subjects communicated with each other for a 4-hour period, before being removed prior to ending the test. Test 2. Subject: YOS-146. Results: YOS-146 starts teaching YOS-2878 multiple easy and complicated math questions during interaction. YOS-2878 begins to speak and somehow manages to solve YOS-146's questions correctly. YOS-146 seems proud of YOS-2878, and YOS-2878 is capable of solving questions related to mathematics. Test 3. Subject: YOS-302. Results: Subject 302 remained docile upon interaction with 2878, and both sat on chairs without saying anything. Test 4. Subject: YOS-436. Results: YOS-436 placed within YOS-2878's enclosure and immediately gained contact with YOS-2878. It then started attempting to touch the breast parts of it, but it seems to be causing YOS-2878 to be very uncomfortable with it, and sometime later would ask someone to remove YOS-436 from the enclosure. The request is approved, and YOS-436 was moved back to its container. Test 5. Subject: YOS-551. Results: YOS-551 started to encourage YOS-2878 about its own goals, and other activities it planned, and also showed a cheerful attitude towards YOS-2878. 2878 is seen with great enthusiasm, and is interested in hearing out 551. This conversation ended 5 hours later. Test 6. Subject: YOS-1297. Results: YOS-1297 immediately dosed its flames to an unknown material, as if not trying to damage YOS-2878 with its flames, and remains in a passive state until removed from enclosure. YOS-2878 does not seem to be comfortable with it, and tries its best to stay away from it, but YOS-1297 remains motionless until away from 2878. Test 7. Subject: YOS-1504. Results: YOS-1504 was placed inside the enclosure, and basically started to mess with YOS-2878 as much as she can. This made YOS-2878 very annoyed to the point that it wanted her out of the room. Subject was removed soon afterwards. Test 8. Subject: YOS-1552. Results: YOS-1552 was placed within the enclosure and started to encourage YOS-2878. YOS-2878 showed signs of excitement and a little bit of love. YOS-1552 was removed from the enclosure before YOS-2878 did something else. Test 9. Subject: YOS-2726. Results: YOS-2878 and YOS-2726 communicated with each other for 7 hours, before YOS-2726 left the room, with a promise at the end. Test 10. Subject: YOS-2884. Results: both subjects are now in a friendly relationship when interacting with each other, and both of their enclosures are close to one another due to a promise with one another. Test 11. Subject: YOS-3285. Results: a 8-meter water tank is placed within YOS-2878's enclosure, and YOS-3285 interacts with it, and offers 2878 a hand to give her an anomalous effect that is to be looked after soon, and 3285 was removed from the enclosure. Test 12. Subject: YOS-3496. Results: a small container was opened to let YOS-3496 out. YOS-2878 showed small signs of fear upon coming into contact with it, although 3496 didn't attack it in any way, and was later removed from the cell. Test 13. Subject: YOS-4367. Results: YOS-4367 simply lays in the cell, and YOS-2878 simply does the same for 2 hours before YOS-4367 was removed from the cell. Test 14. Subject: YOS-4687. Results: YOS-2878 was provided with a computer device currently housing YOS-4687, and communicated with it. 4687 does not show any romantic attraction towards 2878, if it is aware that it took the form of a woman, and simply entered the room just to hang out with it, before disappearing 4 hours later. Test 15. Subject: YOS-5685. Results: YOS-5685 is placed inside the container, both subjects interact with each other. YOS-2878 shows no signs of love, and instead communicates with her. Test 16. Subject: YOS-7666. Results: since YOS-7666 only affects males, the results were as expected. Both subjects simply communicated with each other for 7 hours, and told what their purposes are, and 7666 is removed by a female staff member.
Note: all of these YOS subjects seem to react in a similar way, going against their original purposes, although some of them made sense in a way. At least they didn't do any harm to 2878 in any particular way, although we had to forcefully remove them directly. I would prefer not to do any more tests with other anomalies, just in case the slime lady somehow manages to terminate a certain anomaly.
Dr. Coyote. Addendum 2878-4. After multiple conversations with both YOS-2878 and YOS-2884 were growing higher, both YOS-2878 and YOS-2884 were given a cell close to one another, and was connected with a single wooden door to allow access to the two different rooms.